India is sort of inexplicable. It of course also has the most inefficient state on earth. For instance, too many infants die. Many who survive are malnourished. We exploit women citizens. Our forests are depleting. Our rivers are drying. Our urban drains stink and overflow. A lot of under trial prisoners languish without bail. Minorities ghettoize in dread. And so many young people just remain unemployed in their most productive years. Yet, despite all of this, we see a very curious paradox. Indians continue to have a touching faith in their government, in their state. Now, I first confronted this paradox in the 1990s. Ironically, that was the decade in which India's private enterprise was unshackled. For nearly half a century until then, we had been held in thrall by the state. Whether we bought a phone, whether we flew to another city, we kept our savings in the bank, we bought an insurance policy, or even watched television. As simple as that. These routine, everyday activities could only be done via what was called an instrumentality of the state. That was quite weird and of course quite intimidating as well. Now come 1991 and these state monopolies were smashed open. Suddenly, there were glossy logos and jingles. They began to assault our senses. Airtel, Orange, HDFC, ICICI, Jet, Kingfisher, Indigo, Zee, Star, Sony, all private products trying to wean disgruntled Indian consumers away from the very dull MTNL, BSNL, Bank of India, Air India, Doordarshan. Yet, and note this, every survey in those days would throw up a very mysterious conundrum. Which airline do you trust most, if the question was? The answer, believe it or not, Air India and Indian Airlines. They would win that contest hands down. I kid you not. People trusted Air India. Which is your preferred bank? Even some of the stodgiest public sector banks would trump the classy ads and the artful interiors of the newbies. Now, you simply won't believe this one. Even MTNL's patchy service was preferred over the spanking new technology of the newcomers. And so on. The state companies won hands down every time. Frankly, while it may appear counterintuitive, there was a somewhat cruel explanation for this love of the state. At one level, we suffered under a super state that had kept us poor. But at another level, that very grinding poverty also kept us in bondage to the state. We had become slaves of the state. Our state had transformed into what I would call a post-independence neo-zamindari, or a sort of new age landlordism, which exploited mercilessly. Yet, when violence became intolerable, its victims had no option but to crawl before the perpetrator, the state, begging for mercy. This mindset, the state as the Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, the creator, the preserver, the destroyer, has remained eternal from the 1950s and the 1960s. Until now, it has remained eternal because now a tiny virus has forced this very monster on its knees. In 45 days of trying to vaccinate the country on its own, the Indian state has struggled with an astonishingly paltry daily average of just 350,000 doses. At such a poor vaccination rate, it could take 1800 days or 5 years to just vaccinate the cohort of 300 million vulnerable people, and these include frontline workers to the 50 years plus elderly. So the Indian state realized its limitations, it scampered, it retreated, throwing everything open to the, they would often ridicule the private sector, but they threw everything open to the private sector. Now, anybody in the cohort can walk in at any health facility, anywhere in India, showing any kind of photo ID to get this jab. So from an earlier, no you won't, it's now, please do anything, dear private people, but save my country from Armageddon. And exactly 30 days earlier, this very Indian state had confronted yet another bitter reality, that it was incapable of running business enterprises and needed to aggressively privatize.
सरकार का ये दायित्व है कि वो देश के एंटरप्राइज को, बिजनेस को पूरा समर्थन दे, लेकिन सरकार खुद एंटरप्राइज चलाएं, उसकी मालिक बनी रहे। आज के युग में न ये आवश्यक है, न ये संभव रहा है। इसलिए मैं कहता हूं, गवर्नमेंट हैज नो बिजनेस टू बी इन बिजनेस।
So we've seen two massive retreats by our imperious state in 1 month. I reckon the Ides of March has come early this year in February 2021 when the Indian state made peace with its own incapacity. और अगर यही विचार जो मैंने अभी आपके सामने रखे अंग्रेजी में आप हिंदी में सुनना चाहते हैं तो आप हमारी हिंदी क्विंट की यूट्यूब चैनल पे जाइए और यही वीडियो आपको हिंदी में भी मिलेगा। एंड ऑफ कोर्स you must not forget to like, share and subscribe to our YouTube channel right now.